In the shadows of well-known events and celebrated heroes lie hidden truths that are seldom discussed. Events that defy belief and shake our understanding of humanity's past. From covert military experiments to gruesome acts of war, these moments in history were often kept in the shadows, concealed by those who wish to rewrite the narrative. Today, we're peeling back the layers to reveal 25 events you've probably never heard of. You might be surprised, disturbed, and even left wondering just how much of our shared history remains hidden. I'm Mike with List 25, and here are 25 shocking historical events you never knew existed. 25. The Tsunami Bomb Experiment. During World War II, the US and New Zealand teamed up on a top-secret mission called Project SEAL. Their goal was to create a weapon that could trigger a massive tsunami and obliterate enemy coastal cities. The plan involved setting off a series of underwater explosions to generate a 33-foot wave. Over 37,000 test blasts were conducted around New Zealand and New Caledonia between 1944 and 45. However, despite initial high hopes, the idea was ultimately scrapped. It turned out they needed 2 million kilograms of explosives spread across a 5-mile stretch offshore to make it work. The project was abandoned in 1945. 24. The Undefeated Wrestling Princess. You've got to love a woman who sets her own terms. Kutlun wasn't your average Mongolian princess. As the daughter of Kaidu and a descendant of Chinggis Khan, she combined royal lineage with unmatched physical strength. She challenged any suitor who wanted her hand in marriage to a wrestling match. The catch? If they lost, and they always did, they had to forfeit 100 horses. By the end of her wrestling career, it was said that she had amassed over 10,000 horses. But Kutlun wasn't just a wrestler. She rode alongside her father in countless military campaigns, proving herself as a fierce warrior and a trusted strategist. Despite the pressure of a patriarchal society, she ultimately carved out a place for herself as one of the most remarkable figures in Mongol history. Hey guys, just jumping in here real quick to tell you some exciting news. You know how you love watching our videos for amazing facts? Well, what if I told you that you could also have 500 amazing facts in the palm of your hand? That's right, we wrote a book. This one right here. What the facts are you talking about? And you can order it right now and have List 25 right in your library or on your coffee table or wherever it is you keep your books. It's available right now on Amazon, so click the link in the description and grab yourself and friends and family a copy today. 23. The Anti-Comet Pills. When Halley's Comet made its appearance in 1910, it sparked widespread fear rather than awe. And instead of putting people at ease, some astronomers, like Camille Flammarion, stoked the panic by suggesting that the cyanogen gas found in the comet's tail could potentially poison Earth's atmosphere, threatening all life. Despite public reassurances from other scientists, a lot of people believed that the worst was coming. And that's where the opportunistic con artists stepped up to the plate. They seized this moment of mass hysteria to sell anti-comet pills, and even comet-proof umbrellas. The so-called remedies were nothing more than sugar pills, but they were marketed as life-saving elixirs. Even gas masks flew off the shelves, though the cyanogen in the tail of the comet was far too diluted to harm anyone. 22. When fashion turned violent. In September 1922, New York City experienced one of its strangest episodes, the Straw Hat Riots. It all started with an unwritten rule. Men had to stop wearing straw hats after September 15th, known as Felt Hat Day. Anyone caught violating the fashion faux pas was fair game for ridicule and, more often than not, had their hats stomped to pieces. But things took a dangerous turn when on September 13th, a group of teens decided to jump the gun, targeting factory and dock workers who were still donning straw hats. What began as mischief quickly spiraled into a week-long riot. Gangs roamed the streets, snatching hats and even attacking those who resisted. The chaos even stopped traffic on the Manhattan Bridge, and several men were hospitalized due to the beatings they received. 21. Los Desaparecidos, the Disappeared of Chile. In 1973, Chile's President Salvador Allende was overthrown in a coup backed by the US, and General Augusto Pinochet took over. What followed was a 17-year dictatorship that left deep scars across the country. Pinochet's rule was brutal. He went after anyone who stood against him, whether they were political opponents or just regular people. Many simply vanished, and they're now remembered as Los Desaparecidos, or the Disappeared. It's believed that over 40,000 people were tortured, and at least 3,200 were either killed or disappeared during this dark time. Families are still searching for answers even today. And while some progress has been made, the pain and trauma from those years are still very real for many Chileans. 20. The Banqiao Dam Disaster. In August 1975, Hunan province in China faced one of the deadliest dam failures in history. Typhoon Nina stalled over the region, unleashing relentless rainfall that pushed the Banqiao Dam far beyond its limits. Originally built to withstand what was thought to be a 1,000-year flood, the dam was no match to the unprecedented deluge. Early on August 8th, the dam gave way, releasing a wall of water that surged through the countryside at terrifying speed, destroying everything in its path. The floodwaters formed a wave up to 33 feet high, sweeping away entire towns like Dawenchang, where all 9,600 residents were killed. In total, 62 dams failed that day, creating a catastrophic cascade of water that affected millions. The official death toll was around 26,000, but estimates suggest up to 240,000 people may have died from the floods, subsequent disease, and famine. 19. The 1871 Chinese Massacre in Los Angeles. On October 24, 1871, a mob of about 500 Anglo and Latino men stormed Los Angeles' Chinatown. The violence erupted after a shootout between two rival Chinese associations over a kidnapped woman, which left a police officer injured and a civilian dead. Word of the incident spread quickly, and the mob turned their anger toward the Chinese community, attacking residents indiscriminately. They dragged many victims out of the Coronal Building, a known refuge, and lynched them in makeshift gallows set up around the city. By the time the violence ended, at least 18 Chinese men, some as young as 18, had been brutally murdered. The horrific events was one of the largest mass lynchings in US history. 18. A community shattered. On October 21, 1966, the small village of Aberfan in Wales experienced a tragedy that no one could have imagined. After days of heavy rain, a huge pile of coal waste, teetering dangerously above the town, finally gave way. In the matter of minutes, a wave of thick black sludge came crashing down the hill straight into Pint Junior School. Classrooms full of children were buried under the heavy muck, and 116 kids lost their lives. What makes it even more heartbreaking is that the people of Aberfan had been raising alarms about the coal tip for years, but no one listened. And even though the National Coal Board was held responsible, those in charge faced no real consequences. 17. Poison for profit. In the early 20th century, young women working in US factories were hired to paint watch dials with radium, a glowing substance. These radium girls were told the paint was safe and even encouraged to lick their brushes to keep the tips fine. What they didn't know was that radium is highly radioactive and extremely dangerous. Over time, the women began suffering from horrific symptoms. Their teeth fell out, their jaws disintegrated, and they developed severe anemia and bone cancer. Many died painful deaths, but their struggles didn't end there. When they sought justice, the company not only denied responsibility, but also tried to discredit the women's claims. The case of the Radium Girls eventually led to significant changes in labor laws and workplace safety standards, but only after many lives were lost. 16. A secret Soviet tragedy. On October 24, 1960, a devastating accident happened at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. The Soviet military, eager to test their new R-16 missile, rushed through safety procedures. Nearly 250 people, including high-ranking officials like Marshal Mitrofan Nedlin, were dangerously close to the fully fueled rocket when something went horribly wrong. A mix of technical issues and human error caused the rocket's second stage to ignite prematurely, and the resulting explosion engulfed the launch pad in flames, killing between 74 and 126 people, depending on the source. The Soviet government covered up the disaster, claiming Nedlin died in a plane crash. The truth only came out decades later. 15. A deadly clash over a pint of beer. On February 10, 1355, a minor argument at the Swindlestock Tavern in Oxford, England sparked one of the most violent town and gown clashes in history. It all started when two Oxford University students complained about the quality of their beer and insulted the innkeeper. What should have been a trivial dispute escalated rapidly. Word spread, and soon students and townspeople were attacking each other with weapons. The violence continued for 3 days, leaving 63 students and 30 townspeople dead. In the aftermath, the town was forced to pay reparations to the university and make a yearly penance for their role in the violence. The annual penance continued until 1825, when the mayor at the time, Isaac Grubb, refused to participate, arguing that 5 centuries of humiliation was enough. After that, the tradition was finally abolished. 14. The Great Emu War. In 1932, Australia faced a unique problem. A massive flock of emus, about 20,000 strong, migrated to the farmlands of Western Australia. The flightless birds were wreaking havoc on crops, and farmers were desperate for help. So, the government's best and brightest got together and decided to send soldiers equipped with machine guns to tackle the emu invasion. But things didn't go as planned. The emus were faster and more agile than expected, scattering in small groups and making it nearly impossible to shoot them effectively. Only a few hundred were ultimately killed, and the operation was called off. The war lasted about a month, and the emus emerged victorious. 13. From bitter rivals to unexpected allies. On April 8, 1904, Britain and France signed the Entente Cordiale, an agreement that put an end to the nearly 1,000 years of rivalry. These two nations had spent centuries at each other's throats, fighting wars and competing for global influence. But in a surprising move, they decided to bury the hatchet and sort out their colonial disputes. What made this so shocking was how quickly they went from bitter enemies to allies. This newfound friendship didn't just end old grudges, it paved the way for them to stand together against Germany in World War I, shifting the balance of power in Europe and contributing to the formation of the Triple Entente with Russia, changing the geopolitical landscape forever. 12. The Reindeer Gift. This item will make your heart feel warm all over. In the summer of 1941, while stationed at the Soviet port of Murmansk, the crew of the British submarine HMS Trident received an unexpected gift: a live reindeer. During dinner, Commander Jeffrey Sladen mentioned that his wife back home struggled to push their baby's pram through the snow. The Russian admiral, perhaps after some good-natured vodka toasts, decided she needed a reindeer. So, a young reindeer named Pollyanna was brought aboard the sub. Getting Pollyanna onto the sub was tricky, but once on board she adapted well, enjoying condensed milk and even nibbling on navigation charts. After 6 weeks at sea, she had grown so much that she couldn't fit back through the torpedo tube she came in through, so they had to winch her out of the main hatch. Pollyanna was eventually sent to the London Zoo, where she remained a beloved attraction for years to come. 11. The Samurai's Inflatable Cloaks. In feudal Japan, high-ranking samurai used an unusual type of protection called a horo. This cloak, attached to the back of their armor, was made of silk and would inflate like a balloon when the samurai rode on horseback. It wasn't just for show. The horo could actually provide a buffer against arrows. The fabric, billowing behind them, would either deflect arrows or slow them down enough to reduce their impact, offering significant protection from behind. 10. The CIA's creative evasion tactic. During the Cold War, CIA agents in Moscow had to get creative to shake off KGB tails. Knowing they were being closely watched, they devised a clever ruse involving inflatable dolls. The plan was simple, yet effective. While driving through the city, a CIA officer would slip out of the car at a prearranged spot, disguised as an ordinary local. Meanwhile, the driver would deploy an inflatable doll dressed in typical attire to replace the agent in the passenger seat. This dummy, complete with a fedora, would momentarily fool the KGB agents trailing them, creating a crucial window for the operative to slip away unnoticed. 9. The last duel using fencing swords happened in 1967. I know, this might be hard to believe, but the best part was, it was caught on film. It all started in the French National Assembly in Paris, where politician Gaston Defferre insulted his opponent René Ribière by calling him an idiot, or something along those lines. Ribière, who was getting married the very next day, demanded an apology. When Defferre refused, Ribière challenged him to a duel. The duel took place with swords, and while the men ended up with a couple of minor wounds, they both survived the encounter. 8. The last married pope in office. Since I'm talking about incredible lasts, Pope Adrian II holds the unique distinction of being the last pope to be married while in office. When he took up the papacy in 867 CE, Adrian was already in his 70s and had been living with his wife and daughter. Unlike today, this wasn't completely unheard of at the time, but what happened next was truly tragic. His daughter caught the eye of Eleutherius, the son of a rival bishop, who, in a horrifying twist, ended up kidnapping and murdering both her and Adrian's wife. The murder of his wife and daughter cast a long shadow over Adrian's papacy, and his loss reminds us that even a pope is not shielded from personal tragedy. 7. Soldiers didn't even wear helmets at the start of World War I. I know, it's hard to imagine now, but instead they wore soft caps or even traditional headgear like the German Pickelhaube, which offered no protection against the new deadly weaponry of the 20th century. However, it quickly became apparent that something needed to be done when head injuries from shrapnel and shell fragments became a leading cause of casualties. By 1915, the French were the first to introduce steel helmets, followed by the British and Germans, who each developed their own versions, like the Brodie helmet and the Stahlhelm. These helmets weren't bulletproof, but they offered significant protection against shrapnel, drastically reducing head injuries on the battlefield. 6. The Canary Girls. Much like the Radium Girls in the US, who unknowingly exposed themselves to dangerous substances, British women working in munitions factories during World War I faced their own unique sets of hazards. Known as the Canary Girls, these women earned their nicknames because exposure to toxic chemicals turned their skin and hair a vivid yellow. But the effects weren't just skin deep. Many suffered from severe health problems like nausea, anemia, and even liver damage due to prolonged contact with TNT. Some women even gave birth to canary babies, whose skin had a slight yellow tint because of their mother's exposure to TNT while pregnant. About 400 cases of toxic jaundice were recorded among these workers, and sadly, around 100 of them proved fatal. Even after the war, many continued to experience health issues like liver disease and respiratory problems, living with the long-term consequences of their wartime service. 5. The British royal family changed their name amid rising anti-German sentiment. During World War I, anti-German sentiment was spreading fast across Britain, and the royal family's German-sounding name, Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, became a real problem. To show they were fully behind the British people, King George V decided to change the family name to Windsor on July 17, 1917. The new name, taken from Windsor Castle, was meant to reinforce their connection to Britain. It worked, helping to ease concerns about where their loyalties lay during such a tense time. 4. When heads were fired as cannonballs. During the Great Siege of Malta in 1565, things got extremely brutal. After the Ottomans executed several knights, their commander, Mustafa Pasha, had their bodies displayed on makeshift crucifixes and floated them across the bay. If he hoped to scare the Knights Hospitaller, it didn't work. In retaliation, Grandmaster Jean de Valette ordered all Turkish prisoners to be beheaded, and their heads were fired back at the Ottoman camp using cannons. The siege lasted nearly 4 months, with thousands losing their lives. 3. The US Army's strange World War II plan. During World War II, the US Army tried something truly bizarre, training dogs to hunt and kill Japanese soldiers without any human guidance. William A. Prester came up with the idea that dogs could be trained to recognize Japanese soldiers by scent. A camp was set up on Cat Island, Mississippi, and Japanese-American soldiers were brought in as bait for the dogs. The training methods were brutal. Too brutal to go into detail here, but suffice it to say that the dogs were whipped, shocked, and forced to endure harsh conditions to make them more aggressive. The Nisei soldiers were also instructed to mistreat the dogs to build their hostility. And yet, despite the disgusting tactics, the dogs simply couldn't be trained to hunt and kill soldiers on their own. By early 1943, the program was shut down as a failure. 2. The Christmas Eve Massacre. On Christmas Eve, 1969, Equatorial Guinea's dictator Francisco Macias Nguema orchestrated one of the most horrifying displays of his cruel regime. He rounded up around 186 suspected dissidents and took them to the National Stadium in Malabo. As the popular song "Those Were the Days" played over loudspeakers, Nguema's men, reportedly dressed as Santa Claus, shot and hanged 150 of them right there. The remaining 36 were buried up to their necks and left to die. The massacre was more than just a show of force. It was a terrifying display of the lengths to which Nguema would go to eliminate his enemies. He ruled Equatorial Guinea with an iron fist for over a decade, from 1968 until his regime finally collapsed in 1979. 1. The Massacre of Demin. We're ending today's list on a very, very dark item, and I'm really, really sorry about that. Have you ever heard about the Massacre of Demin? In May 1945, the small German town of Demin got caught in a wave of mass suicides. The town's inhabitants were terrified of the Red Army after hearing about the violence and destruction they left behind in other towns. So, when the Soviet troops finally entered Demin, the people took fate into their own hands. Over the next few days, hundreds of people took their own lives. Parents killed their young children before using guns, poison, or the nearby rivers to kill themselves. The Soviet forces were shocked by what they saw. They even tried to help where they could, but in the end, between 700 and 1,200 people died. It was one of the most terrible moments of World War II. And sadly, it wasn't the only time something like this happened. In 73 CE, almost 1,000 people at Masada chose death over capture by the Romans. And during the Battle of Okinawa in 1945, Japanese civilians basically did the same. These events show us how fear and hopelessness can drive people to the extreme, and it's a terrible reminder of what happens when all hope is gone. There's a lesson in there for the rest of us, even if it's just to remember that empathy and love should be the way we choose to tread through the world. And that's the end of today's journey together. If these stories left you questioning what else might be lurking in the past, you'll want to explore our video on 25 unbelievable historical facts that change everything. There, I uncover more stories from our not-too-distant past, like the man who survived a rod piercing his brain, the heroic dog that defused a bomb, and the tragic fate of Stalin's eldest son. If that's piqued your interest, then simply click on the link right here. Now I'll catch you next time.